The N64 was a really interesting console, and it was great, but its limitations were pretty obvious. It was Nintendo's first attempt at making a true 3D console, and with many of its games, Nintendo and third parties relied on the technology and the novelty that came with it to be the wow factor. And as a kid in the early 2000s, having never seen anything like this before, I was a bit more forgiving of those limitations than I would be just a few short years later. Where the N64 was the first console I bought with my own money, the GameCube was the first console I bought brand new. Because of that, I had a completely different set of expectations for it and the games it had. N64 games like Star Fox 64, Super Mario 64, or Super Smash Bros. Were able to wow me by nature of being exciting new 3D games, where I had only played small little 2D games on the NES or Game Boy before. But by the time I got my GameCube, nothing like that was going to make an impact anymore. Especially as I entered my teen years, I wanted more substance, needed games that were both new and interesting, as well as being far more refined than anything that came before. Thankfully, Nintendo was in the perfect position to meet those expectations, for better or worse. The GameCube was when they were finally able to be creative and ambitious with their 3D worlds, and partially due to its relative failure, experimental. The system launched with games like Luigi's Mansion and Animal Crossing, and by the end of the GameCube's lifespan, we were getting games like Chibi Robo and Odama. That creativity definitely made its way into the more established franchises too, like The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker and Super Mario Sunshine, but in my opinion, one of the most creative, interesting, and straight-up best games on the system was 2004's sequel to Paper Mario, The Thousand-Year Door. Like many of its N64 siblings, Paper Mario did play things pretty safe, all things considered. Bowser still kidnapped Peach, Mario still had to traverse standard Mario-themed worlds, and aside from the Peach sections, not a whole lot was done to mess with the RPG format. That worked extremely well as a start to a new franchise, but if Intelligent Systems were going to make a sequel, they'd have to follow the example of a lot of other GameCube developers and get really creative. Okay, so I'm not very good at obfuscating my opinions on this game, so I'll just go out and say it. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is, in my opinion, one of the best games Nintendo has ever made, and in fact is my go-to example for a perfect sequel. Sequels in games are a great way to fix issues or take ideas further than was possible or feasible earlier, and The Thousand-Year Door does that in spades. So if you just wanted to know if the game is good and if you should play it, then there's your recommendation. But if you wanted a bit more than that, then stay tuned while we explore why I love Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door more than pretty much anything else on the GameCube. The intro story is quite a bit more mysterious this time around, and has a much more serious tone than the first game. We start with a story about an ancient civilization that went from thriving to destroyed over the course of a single night. The cause of that catastrophe was only known by those people, and with them gone, it fell into legend, with interest only being revived by the modern inhabitants of Rogueport being morphed into a tale of great treasure. We then transition to see Peach walking around Rogueport, where she's beckoned by a seedy salesman who offers her a strange box, which supposedly contains a map to the aforementioned treasure. We then check in on Mario and Luigi, and just like in the first game, Parakarry delivers a letter from Peach. She's included the map with this letter and asks Mario to travel to Rogueport in order to join her in searching for the treasure. Immediately after that, Mario sets sail for places unknown. This game's prologue is so much better than the N64 original. Paper Mario was pretty bloated early on, and had so little mechanically going for it that it ended up feeling pretty slow. Thousand-Year Door's prologue is quite a bit brisker. Mario is barely off the boat when trouble pops up. The commotion seems to be caused by a guy named Lord Crump, which honestly just sounds like one of the names I'd give a Dark Souls character, but that's beside the point. Crump is harassing a Goomba, and Mario, being the hero type, hops in to lend a hand. Yeah, barely 1 minute of actual gameplay in, and we're in our first battle, action commands and everything. After Crump gets creamed, Mario and this Goomba, named Goombella, escape to a different part of the city. However, Peach is nowhere to be found. Mario and his new partner go see Professor Frankly to see what he can do to decipher the map. They go on a small expedition into the sewers because, of course, and eventually they find the Thousand-Year Door itself. The map reacts to the door and shows the location of one of the legendary crystal stars. With no other information about Peach available, they assume she went out looking for this crystal star as well, and follow in those same footsteps. The entire prologue is out of the way in like half an hour, which is really nice. Now it is wordy, but since this is an entirely new place with new history, lore, and legends to explain, I'm willing to forgive that. Thousand-Year Door can't just rely on people's previous knowledge like Paper Mario was able to for the most part, so it makes sense that it has to get people up to speed here. What's explained here is just the tip of the iceberg, of course, and there's far more to learn and uncover as Mario's journey progresses. The secret of Rogueport's ancient treasure is far deeper and more perilous than a simple X marks the spot buried treasure. Speaking of Rogueport, I think that's a good place to start as it sets the tone for the entire game. Toad Town was a nice little village full of good people, nice looking buildings, and was just generally pleasant to be in. Rogueport, on the other hand, really isn't. It's run down, impoverished, depressing, and even dangerous. Mario actually gets mugged during his first visit, losing half the money he had at the start. You can get that money back, so it's more flavor than anything, but yeah. Add in the street gangs and mob violence, and you get a place that really isn't somewhere you'd recommend a princess to go vacationing in, at least the east side. The west side of town is actually relatively nice. It has a flower garden, some more well-maintained houses, a game corner, and even a fancy train station. What's the deal here? Well, I mentioned mob violence earlier, and that's the reason. The Pianta mob has set themselves up in the west part of town, and anyone on their good side gets to live the high life in luxury and safety. Everyone else? Well, you've seen what happens to them. I actually love this setting. It shows how much of a stranglehold the mob has on Rogueport, and it shows an obvious divide that effectively cuts the town in half. It's the sort of thing that does happen, but you don't really expect a Mario game to acknowledge, you know? The whole tone of the game is way darker and more cynical than the original. Not to the point where you'd really call it edgy, but the world and writing definitely has quite a bit more bite to it than the first game had. This really adds to the game's personality. Rogueport and the areas around it aren't as idyllic or traditionally upbeat as most Mario places, so it makes sense that the citizens are equally jaded. Never is this more true than in Chapter 4's Twilight Town. This is a town that's been beaten down by a terrible curse that whenever a bell rings, one of their citizens is turned into a pig, permanently for all they know. You can tell that the people here are tired, scared, and many of them have effectively given up. And I understand why. Whenever the bell rings, someone is turned into a pig. You'll never know who it is until it happens, and you know that every time it does, it could be you. You can even see this happen in front of your own eyes. If you talk to this woman in her home, she tells you that after her husband disappeared, she couldn't feed her kids and they're starving. As soon as that's done, the bell rings and she's turned as well, leaving these kids with no one, starving, alone, and hopeless. Even the wildlife here is succumbing to the despair. You can eventually eavesdrop on what the birds in Twilight Town are talking about, and some of it gets pretty heavy too. Like, you'll hear some birds talking about the depletion of fossil fuels and how we need to transition to more renewable resources. This is a Mario game. You don't really expect that level of commentary on real-world issues from Mario, but in this game it really fits and helps cement the tone of this world and its inhabitants. But on the other hand, that extra bite lets the game go a bit darker and meaner with its humor, which I also really love. Paper Mario was clever, but Thousand-Year Door gets to be straight up funny. Characters throw insults at each other all the time, with even Mario being able to join in. In between Chapter 1 and 2, Mario comes across this thing called a puny. It's scared and runs away, and once Mario corners it, it asks if Mario's gonna be mean to it. Obviously, the correct answer is no, of course not, but me, being a jerk, always go with the guess again, nerd option. Mario's partners always reprimand him when he says things like this, but man, I love portraying Mario as this vindictive ass that people just have to deal with because he saves the kingdom all the time. I guess that's why when Mario gets body snatched, nobody seems to bat an eye. Speaking of characters, this is another aspect of Thousand Year Door that is a massive step up from Paper Mario. Characters in Paper Mario were fun, but being such a simple game with such a simple story, were fairly thin. Bowser and Peach definitely got to shine, but aside from them, Paper Mario was an event-driven story, not a character-driven one. Thousand Year Door isn't the opposite by any means, but it leans more into its characters and relationships to drive the story forward. For instance, the mob boss Don Pianta. He and his family are developed pretty nicely throughout the game. When you first meet Don Pianta asking him for a favor, a ticket to get to the floating amusement park Glitzville, he's a pretty typical gruff mobster. He'll give Mario the ticket he needs, but only if Mario does something for him first. His daughter and former right-hand man have eloped, and if Mario finds them, he'll give him the ticket. When Mario finds them, of course getting far too deep into character as the mobster's muscle, the two decide to go back and try to persuade the Don into letting them go, rather than just running away. Eventually, the Don does let them leave, showing that despite the perceived betrayal, he's willing to put his daughter's happiness over maintaining the mob's iron fist on its members and the city. Later in the game, we return to find that the Don has fallen ill in the time since then. Mario is tasked with bringing Frankie and Francesca back in order to help him recover. When they return, the Don pretty much immediately returns back to health, proving that despite being by all standards a pretty horrible guy, who's ruthless and powerful enough to split Rogueport in half, he's also just a man who really cares about his family and relies on them for his own happiness. This sort of character writing is all over the place in Thousand Year Door, and in fact it even applies to the partners, which is so beneficial. The partners weren't bad in Paper Mario, they were all unique and had their own personalities, but the times when they were actually allowed to shine and be their own characters were very limited. Like, Cooper talked to Colorado, and Goombario had a conversation with his mom and sister in Toad Town, but for the most part, partners would get a bit of spotlight during their introductory chapter, then fade into the background for the rest of the game. That's not the case in Thousand Year Door. Partners still don't talk a lot, but they have far more opportunities to speak their mind, and even occasionally speak to each other. Not to mention that they generally have far more relationships and connections than in the first game, making for more fully rounded, true characters. Admiral Bobbery is the best for this, easily. The entire opening of Chapter 5 is dedicated to learning about Bobbery's personality, history, and drives. He's a grief-ridden sailor who lost the love of his life while out to sea, and upon return blames himself for her death, so he vows to never sail again. His story is so heartbreaking, and when he's finally able to read his wife's last words, begging him to not lose both of his life's true loves, it's such an emotional gut punch. I actually started tearing up just writing this paragraph, it's so well done. Obviously, not all of the partners have backstories like Bobbery, but they all have backstories. Flurry is a retired stage performer longing for the spotlight again. Koops is a meek Koopa who wants to avenge his father's apparent death at the hands of Hooktail. The Yoshi, well, I guess he doesn't really have a backstory since he isn't born until Chapter 3. I named him Glostiers, by the way, because I'm stupid. And, Vivian, well, actually we'll get into her deal a little bit later on. But yeah, partners and other characters have seen a huge improvement in terms of their characterization and involvement in the story. And they're not alone in this. The entire narrative and world has been hugely expanded on, and from start to finish is more creative, more engaging, and more fun. And might I remind you that I really love most of the first game's chapters, but the Thousand Year Door really goes above and beyond here. Like with Paper Mario, I'm not going to do a play-by-play of the entire story, but I'll give a few examples of my favorite chapters. Long story short, Mario is searching for the crystal stars, which the map he's given by Peach shows the location of. These stars are related to the titular Thousand Year Door, and while they're supposed to reveal some great treasure, the fact that the evil team, the X-Nauts, are also searching for them, it's pretty safe to say that they're not entirely good news. Chapter 3 of Glitz and Glory is an easy early standout. It's our introduction to Don Pianta and his crew, which technically takes place in between chapters 2 and 3, but I tend to count anything after the end of chapter screen to be part of the next. But what's most interesting about this chapter is that it's basically an anime tournament arc. Mario arrives in Glitzville, and in order to get the Crystal Star, he has to enroll in the city's Battle League and fight his way to the top through friends and adversaries alike in order to get the Champion's Belt. There's even a midpoint power-up to beat a seemingly unsurpassable enemy. Now, if you know me at all, you may think this would be my least favorite because I very much dislike grinding in RPGs. But the way the chapter is structured alleviates a lot of that and makes the entire thing way more engaging, as well as the combat system itself just being a ton of fun, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Of Glitz and Glory has a big twist in the tournament structure. It's equally a mystery. The Glitz Pit has been subject to rumors of fighters going missing and strange events happening once the doors close for the night. On top of that, Mario starts getting strange emails on his fancy new Game Boy Advance SP TM that seems to hint that there's something far more sinister going on. I'm not going to spoil how it ends, but there's some really good twists and turns, and it keeps you guessing at what's really happening and why until the very end. Chapter 6 is another favorite of mine. This one is a format-bending affair, almost entirely taking place on a train. Before this is the conclusion of the Pianta story, which I've already raved about, but everything after is arguably just as good, if not better. It's another mystery. Wow, ScionVyse likes a mystery chapter? What a surprise. This time being on the surface very mundane, but growing more and more serious as time goes on. Some of the game's best gags are in this chapter, with pretty much everything the Penguin Detective Pennington says being hilarious, and some great interactions with other characters, and it even has the franchise's first ever game over gag. There's gonna be a lot more of those, believe me. A ghost asks you to find its diary and bring it back to them with the instructions to not read it. So, of course, you can read it and instantly get murdered for your crime. It's not the funniest of these gags, but my Mario was kind of a jerk in this playthrough, so it makes perfect sense he wouldn't care what some silly ghost would want. Of course, there are some weaker chapters. Thankfully, unlike Paper Mario, none of these are bad, just less good. The weakest is easily Chapter 2, Boggly Woods. It has its merits for sure. This chapter has the secret entrance joke, which is the best joke in the game, and I will die on that hill, but there's a lot of less good things too. Being pretty much entirely black and white doesn't make for a super interesting area, there's a lot of backtracking, and as you go, you get more punies to boss around. This doesn't seem like a bad thing, but when you get 100 of them, getting them where you need them to be is such a chore, and makes playing through the chapter far more tedious than would be otherwise. Another chapter I find kind of weak, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of shifty looks for this one, is Chapter 4 for Pigs the Bell Tolls. This is purely a gameplay gripe, let me be perfectly clear here. The atmosphere, the story, the themes, they're all top-notch, and are arguably as good as the game gets. But, man, this chapter gets to be a slog. There are only two main areas in this chapter, Twilight Town and the creepy steeple with, like, 4 screens of enemy-filled forest in between. That's not inherently bad, but the problem that arises is that you'll be going back and forth in between these two areas multiple times. Outside of Twilight Town's immaculate world building and atmosphere, there really isn't a lot here, and it's padded out enormously by the area's setup. Mario goes to Creepy Steeple, beats a guy for his Crystal Star, and gets body snatched. Mario chases the guy back to Twilight Town to confront him, but can't win because he doesn't know his true name. Mario then recruits Vivian, one of the Shadow Sirens, after helping her out, who finally decides to stop taking her sister's abuse, and heads back to the Creepy Steeple to find out the guy's name. A disgruntled parrot says his name, Dupliss, and after finding the letter P, which was missing from the answer box earlier, Mario and Vivian head back to Twilight Town. With his name exposed, Beetlejuice heads back to the steeple. And finally, once again, Mario heads up the steeple, beats him once and for all, and gets the star. There's like 5 minutes worth of events after leaving Twilight Town for the first time, but it just keeps going. Again, it's not like it isn't good, but if they added one more area to the other side of Twilight Town to keep the parrot in or something, especially with a shortcut back to the steeple, It'd make the entire chapter much less of a tedious back and forth hike and more of a full circle. Speaking of tedious, there is one final thing I have to talk about, or I'm sure someone will leave an angry comment about it. In between chapter 6 and 7 is when the story really starts to come together. We'll get into that a little bit later as well, but basically Peach is being held on the moon and Mario needs to find a way to get there. This involves a big globe-trotting fetch quest where we have to go around to every place we've been before searching for General White, a bob-omb in charge of a giant cannon that can blast Mario into space. This is actually such a pain in the ass because it takes forever and there's no way to truncate it. I wish they would have done this differently. Like, have General White show up in one place randomly chosen at the start of a playthrough. Then it's just a matter of remembering where he was and finding him that way. If you did remember, it'd be quick, but if not, it'd be a longer process. First-time players probably wouldn't even register that he's important, making it purely a time-saving process for people going through a second time. As it is, it's just a way to lengthen playtime that doesn't really add anything meaningful to the game, but it's still nowhere near as bad as Flower Fields was. That really is as bad as Thousand Year Door gets, a bland chapter with one annoying mechanic, a chapter that, while otherwise excellent, is padded out more than it needed, and one small time waster near the end. But even then, they're only slightly less enjoyable than the others, which I would have a hard time ranking because they're all just so good. Its overwhelming consistency, and in fact, consistent improvement over its predecessor carries over into other aspects of the game, none being more obvious than the battle system. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's hard to make a really good sequel to an already good game. Expanding on already fleshed out ideas and finding shortcomings to remedy is really hard, especially if a person or team is invested in the art they already made. So, it's with great pleasure that I can safely say that Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door's battle system is an absolute triumph. It builds off the same system used in the N64 entry. Mario and a partner face off against various bad guys in turn-based combat, supplemented by action commands to add a skill factor and badges to increase variety and add an element of character building to the mix. But it takes these ideas so much further than Paper Mario did, and not only did they add more depth to the combat, but they made engaging in battles just so much more fun. Take action commands. At a glance, they're not too much different from Paper Mario. Mario's jumps are still timed button presses, and his hammer hits are still holding back on the stick to match a timer. But there's some small changes that make them much more interesting. Mario's spring jump move has him jumping off screen, making the timing much harder, but doing much more damage, or his power smash, which now takes longer to charge than a regular hammer move. The biggest problem I had with the action commands in Paper Mario was the lack of variety in Mario's moves, and yeah, Thousand Year Door more or less solves the problem. Mario's partners are just as varied and fun to use as ever, and there's even more new action commands to make fighting even better. But that's not all that they added. In Paper Mario, all Mario could do to defend himself was a timed A press to block 1 point of damage. That was fine, and was really important for partners who'd lose turns when hit, but aside from that, it wasn't that engaging. Thousand Year Door doesn't remove this, but it adds an entirely new defensive option. A super guard that will not only block all damage that Mario receives, but deal 1 damage point back to his enemies. I adore this. It's a risk-reward system that hugely pays off if you pull it off, but is worse if you fail. This runs the risk of being too powerful, but I think it's balanced out really well. The timing for a super guard is incredibly tight, only 3 frames or 0.05 seconds normally, and a lot of moves don't have immediate tells for the timing, so it takes a good amount of practice to properly nail. If you do, it's super satisfying, but mess it up too much and Mario will start taking loads of damage. So it's up to you whether or not you want to risk a super guard, or go for a less effective but more guaranteed normal guard. The powers Mario get from Crystal Stars have new action commands too, which balances how powerful they are. I'm totally fine with an early game move that can do 6 damage to all enemies if you can completely mess it up with a single button press. And I feel like all the star powers are just overall more well balanced for their power. For instance, the final move you get is Supernova, a hugely powerful attack that can do a massive 15 damage to all enemies. But in order to use it, it takes 6 bars of star power. Compare that to Earth Tremor, which for 2 will do 6 damage to all enemies. At a glance, it seems like Earth Tremor is the better value, but Supernova can do that all in one turn, with the drawback that you basically just need to hoard star power to use it. And beyond the special moves, they've added even more commands to find out, which you can even do from the first battle, but technically aren't even explained until much later and can even be completely missed. These stylish moves can be done with every move Mario and his partners use, and help restore Mario's star power by giving the audience a show. Speaking of the audience, it's not just pure mechanics that have changed in the battle system. The entire framing of the battles has been given a complete overhaul. Paper Mario was a pop-up storybook or a diorama or whatever, so the battles looked like that. It didn't have any mechanical importance, but it helped sell the visual style. But again, Thousand Year Door goes ham and not only changes, but basically improves everything. Battles in the Thousand Year Door are now a stage play with an audience. This isn't a new idea to the Mario series. Super Mario Bros. 3 was also framed as a stage play, but there's some real important mechanics to it now. Nothing you see on screen is purely for show. The audience is how you get more star power. The more people in the crowd, the more you can get. Stylish moves give even more beyond that. On top of the audience, things like stage props can act as hazards, with powerful moves making them unstable, prompting them to then fall on Mario or his enemies. As Mario levels up, his stage will get bigger, which lets him have a larger audience. This is both good and bad, as he can get more star power, but there's more chances for one of those people to not be a fan. This is so brilliant since it adds more dynamics to the battle system. Some of it is random and can't really be predicted, but others, like falling backgrounds or thrown items, can be accounted for. You can block the backgrounds and choose whether or not to beat up the heckler, but you'll need to think about it since sometimes it's just a friend trying to give you a new item. This was probably the best way to expand on the original battle system without revolutionizing the entire thing. These are, for all intents and purposes, small thematic additions that don't change the core experience a lot, but they add up and as a whole, make the battle system even more interesting and cohesive than it already was. And it's just so much more polished overall too. The action commands are more punchy and more satisfying to land, the animations are crazy smooth thanks to the game not being on N64, allowing it to have frame rates, and it's just so much fun. There is one more big change though, and it actually has a big effect on the flow of the combat. Mario's partners have gotten a big upgrade in functionality. In Paper Mario, they were in a lot of ways just another move for Mario to use, kinda like swappable jobs in other RPGs. They didn't have HP, they couldn't use items, couldn't make much use of the badge system, and again were more like an extension of Mario's abilities rather than fully fledged party members. But here they are, and that does a lot more than you'd think. By letting them use items, partners can now be more useful in resource management. By expanding their ability to use badges, partners can now be even more devastating or more supportive than before. And by giving them HP, the developers were able to lean more into difficulty than they did in the first game. Paper Mario, for all intents and purposes, was a pretty easy game. It had a good difficulty curve, but that curve was always a little lower on the y-axis than many others. Thousand Year Door does crank that up a bit. In terms of the main story, there are quite a few bosses that are really tough to take out if you don't know what to do or aren't prepared enough. Mario's stats are basically the same as the first game, starting out with 10 HP, 5 flower points, and 3 badge points, doing a base damage of 1 per hit. But whereas the final boss of Paper Mario hit 99 HP, Thousand Year Door's final boss hits a whopping 150, along with hitting harder, having trickier moves to dodge, along with some more dangerous abilities. But that's not even the hardest fight in the game. Thousand Year Door has an optional dungeon called the Pit of 100 Trials. These are just 100 descending floors with a fight on each one for the most part. If you can make it to the bottom in one piece, you come across this lug Bonetail. This guy has 200 HP and can melt away yours really quickly if you don't pay attention. So yeah, despite starting out at the same point and using the same health and damage system, Thousand Year Door ends up throwing twice as much danger at you at its worst compared to Paper Mario. What makes this more doable is how much more open and freeform the design is when it comes to building Mario as a battler. In Paper Mario, sure, you could focus on one stat, but eventually you'd be forced to branch out into others because of a pretty strict limit to ensure Mario ended up with a balanced amount of health, flower points, and badge points at the end of the game. Thousand Year Door throws all of that out the window and lets the player do basically whatever they want with their builds. You want Mario to be an HP monster? Go ahead. Want to use the most powerful move every turn? Crank that FP up. Or if you're like me, you put pretty much everything into badge points to make Mario as versatile and capable as possible. You can even break base stats with this. Mario starts at 10 HP, right? Well, if you want, you can just go to this guy and change your stats, leaving Mario in a permanent danger state. I've actually done this to break the game before. You can get pretty much infinite Power Rush badges from the Pianta Parlor, so what I did was get Mario in danger, then just stacked on the Power Rushes until Mario would basically OHKO anything he came across. Obviously, this is well beyond what the designers had probably planned for people to do, but it's just a testament to how much more freedom and creativity you're allowed to have here. The guardrails that existed to guide a first-time player through are gone, and because of this, the Thousand Year Door is a far more replayable game, and the team knew it. Badges like Hammerman or Jumpman, which can appear randomly from this merchant in Rogueport, only exist from people wanting to do a specialist challenge run. A regular first-time player wouldn't choose to completely lose the ability to jump just so hammer attacks do 1 point of damage more, but I would, and I have. Whew. Okay, there's one last main gameplay thing I want to go over. When I went over the chapters, I was mainly focused on their overall thematic and scenario design, but the actual level design got a big jump too. This is largely due to the new abilities Mario and his partners get to explore. Mario gets a bunch of curses that contort him into new paper forms, and these are all great. He can turn sideways to slip through narrow paths, roll up into a tube for some speed, as well as rolling under low paths, and even turn into a paper airplane or a boat. I really like the guys that give the curses. They all have the exact same shtick, so when Mario figures it out, the last guy gets really depressed. It's a really cool way to give personality to what would be statues or inanimate objects in other games. This is also the first game to introduce Toadette, who teaches Mario about his hammer and jump abilities used for traversal. The partner abilities are largely the same as in Paper Mario, with some small twists. Bobbery and Bombette both blow stuff up, but you can throw Bobbery instead of just placing him. And Koops works just like Kooper, except you can hold his shell in place, releasing it later for puzzle solving, that sort of thing. The only ability fully gone is Lackluster's Hover, as it was made largely redundant. In its place is Flurry's Gust, which is more for secret finding and occasional puzzle solving. Speaking of which, it's just so much fun to go secret hunting in the Thousand Year Door. There are so many, and the game is so completely full of them that I even managed to find some that I had never seen before during my playthroughs for this video. They can be obvious, like walls with cracks in them, or more subtle, like an outcrop having a missing wall that's barely noticeable. And on top of being just really fun to search for, most of these are very rewarding, containing some incredibly useful badges, items, or shine sprites used to power up your partners. And if you need a bit of help, you can always go through the side quest board and unlock a new partner who will sniff out secrets for you. The level design in general is just so much more intricate than it was in Paper Mario. There is some basic, borderline lazy stuff here. The first two screens heading into chapters 2 and 7 are pretty much identical, just empty areas with piranha plants, clefts, and cloud enemies. However, these areas are few and far between, and on the whole, things are just so much better. Chapter 5's dungeon is super well designed. It flows perfectly and adapts to you getting the paper boat curse in a way that feels natural. But a lot like the first game, the final chapter was where the level design really goes above and beyond. And with that, I think it's time we see what Peach has been up to this point. So, just like in the first game, Peach has her own sections that take place in between Mario's chapters. These are fundamentally the same fun minigame sections where Peach gathers information that is then passed on to Mario, but they come across far differently because of the location, context, and characters she interacts with. Peach's companion isn't a friendly star kid anymore. Oh no, it's far more unique and kinda creepy, to be honest. While being held in the X-Naut base, she's called into a strange room by open doors where she meets Tech. Tech is a computer, the X-Naut's mainframe, and its relationship with Peach is one of the game's more notable creations. It starts off fine, but quickly goes off the rails. Tech has Peach do stuff like dance with the hologram version of herself, and eventually brings her into his room just to ask her what love is. So yeah, the computer falls in love with Peach. Now, this ends up being pretty useful, as he ends up telling Peach a lot of things he probably wouldn't have otherwise, but it's really weird. Especially if you consider the fact that he's connected to all of the base's security cameras, so yeah, Tech watches Peach shower. And this isn't even the only time Peach gets naked in this game. During one section, Tech sends Peach to go get a special information disk from the X-Naut leader, Sir Grotus's room, which is normally not connected to Tech's servers. In order to do this, Peach has to go create an invisibility potion, then take off all of her clothes and walk around the base naked for a while. On this disk, Tech finds a few interesting things. One, that the base is on the moon, but more importantly, it's through him that we find out what's behind the Thousand-Year Door and what the X-Nauts are trying to do. They're trying to revive an ancient demon that was locked away behind the door by the crystal stars, and apparently they need Peach to do that for some reason. We unfortunately don't get these answers from Tech, but all will be revealed in time, I'm sure. Now, by pointing out how creepy Tech is, it may seem like I don't enjoy these sections, but on the contrary. I love that Nintendo, and Intelligent Systems in particular, was so willing to take risks and frankly do things that you'd never expect to happen in any Nintendo game, let alone a Mario game. These sections are unsettling the more you think about them, but like, that's what makes them so enthralling. There's a danger here that just didn't exist in Paper Mario. We don't truly know what Grotus wants or why he needs Peach. We don't know if Tech's truly on our side or if Mario will even be able to find Peach. These are questions that we basically had answered from the start in Paper Mario. Twink was obviously a friend because stars are good, and Twink had a nice happy theme song. We knew that Mario was going to be able to beat Bowser because he's Mario, even if it wasn't easy, and we knew that Bowser wouldn't hurt Peach because he's Bowser. The fact that there's still so much up in the air going into the final stretch of the game is so weird because it's uncharted territory. Unfortunately, before we learn exactly why Peach is needed in the X-Naut plans, Grotus shows up and orders his men to hit the reset this device buttons on Tech, and he's apparently dead. By the time Mario shows up, Grotus and Peach are gone, but he's still able to beat up Crump again and grab the final crystal star. Alright, before we wrap this up, there's a few more miscellaneous things I wanted to talk about here. Firstly, the visual style is so clean and polished. Yes, I am using a texture mod in Dolphin here, but all the mod really does is upscale the existing textures to make them cleaner in resolutions higher than 480i. The artistic direction is almost perfectly maintained, and it gives a good idea as to what a full remaster could look like, and man does it look good. The character designs are so great, they really perfected the look of Mario and Peach in this style in particular. You may notice there's a lot of very unique designs here too, not just in the main cast either. Obviously Flurry and Vivian are completely unique designs, but characters around the world are given much more unique flair than you'd normally expect in a Mario game. And because so many of these characters are so unique, it's much easier to identify them and see them as actual characters rather than just another NPC. Like, I don't care about this Bob-omb because it is identical to all the other nameless, characterless background Bob-ombs in that game. But Papatch? I like Papatch. Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping ahead a few videos here, but the world just feels so much fuller and more alive because characters are allowed to be characters, even compared to the N64 game. Yes, almost every character in that game had a name, but the vast majority were still recolors of the basic Mario creature designs. The creativity on show here is just a step beyond almost anything you'd see in a Mario game. Almost. I also feel like they pushed the paper aesthetic as far as it should go here. There are big monsters made up of a bunch of individual sheets to look like 3D, but the vast majority of characters are still the same charming flat sprites that we all know and love. Oh, and the soundtrack, it's so good. The first game had to rely on the N64's sound fonts to create its music, and while it was excellent, in a lot of ways it sounded like every other N64 game soundtrack. But with the GameCube and the ability to store fully produced songs on the disc with no quality loss, that was no longer a problem. Yuka Tsuchiyoko really went all out with this game's music. It's very synth-heavy, which I really appreciate as I think it really fits with the game's aesthetic, while also still being very Mario, you know? It being so synth-heavy also allowed it to be very uniquely textured as well, which makes just listening to the music a really fun and interesting experience. From the iconic Rogueport theme that really sells the feeling of a bustling slum town, the very danceable X-Naut Fortress theme, the area music is just so fun to listen to. And the battle music, especially unique fight themes like Rockhawk's theme, and Cortez's theme, do a great job of making battles exciting and tense while still being really fun music to listen to outside of that specific context. Okay, before we head into the final dungeon, I almost forgot to talk about Bowser and Luigi. Bowser is still trying to do the whole evil empire thing, and is also on the hunt for the crystal stars, but is always a few steps behind. His sections are mostly fun little 2D platforming bits where instead of mushrooms he eats meat to power up. None of these are really any hard, they're just meant to get him from one comedic set piece to the next, but I'm really glad they're here. I love how the RPGs have turned Bowser from a pretty boring villain into one of the most endearing, goofiest characters in the Mario universe. And while he doesn't get a lot of time to shine here, he will in the future, and I'm happy we got what we did. As for Luigi, he thankfully doesn't have to just sit at home doing nothing the entire game this time. Shortly after Mario leaves, Luigi gets a letter and embarks on his own journey. This is really fun as we get to see what he's up to throughout the game. Each chapter he'll show up in a different part of Rogueport with a new partner by his side. He can tell you stories of what he's been up to, with his partners generally telling us to not believe his filthy lies. It's nice that Luigi gets his own adventure here, even though it's a bit of a farce. At least he doesn't have to just sit at home brooding the entire time. And while we will likely never get the Paper Luigi game we all want, I still have hope, because if you don't have hope, what do you have? Alright, so let's wrap this up. Mario's got all 8 crystal stars, and the only thing left to do is head into the Thousand-Year Door and stop the X-Nauts. After opening the grand door, Mario and his partners enter the Palace of Darkness. There's a sense of sinister decadence here. You can immediately tell that what's being held here is very important, very revered, and very dangerous. This is by a pretty wide margin my favorite dungeon in the franchise. From beginning to end, it's just fantastic. It does start out pretty simply with some similar puzzles to what we saw in the first game, but as soon as you think it might get a little bit repetitive, the game just pulls the rug out from beneath you and puts you in this courtyard. This is probably my favorite section, and it is a pretty simple one, honestly. Just solve some puzzles, beat a boss, and unlock some locks. But it has a certain atmosphere to it, an air of finality, like it could be the last step before reaching the end of the palace. But it's only the halfway point. The second half is arguably even better. The puzzles here get more complex, it's more difficult to find your way around in a good way, and the enemies can be really challenging if you aren't prepared. What's more fun about this half is that it's kind of a boss gauntlet. You had to beat Gloomtail in the first half, but in this second half, before the end, you'll have to fight 3 separate bosses. First are the Shadow Sirens, now with Dupless, who joins up after Chapter 4. They're pretty interesting because for the vast majority of the game, we don't really know what their deal is. Them serving Grotus doesn't really make much sense because their goals don't really seem to mesh. On top of that, while their sections are always steeped in incompetence, mainly from Bedlam, it's never really framed in a comedic way. Especially before Vivian leaves. Bedlam is completely horrible to Vivian, like every sentence is actual emotional abuse. It's way more mean-spirited than anything else in the game, and that was on purpose. Anyways, they go down pretty easily, and once we reach the end, the very bottom of the palace, we get our climax. Grotus is at the throne and he's been waiting for us. Mario's ready to trounce him, but Grotus has the upper hand. By gathering all the crystal stars, we've basically played right into his hand. After a battle, he reveals that he's got Peach captive, and if Mario attacks, he'll hurt Peach. Obviously, Mario is willing to risk Peach's life to satisfy his own bloodlust. But before the final showdown, Bowser makes his appearance, crashing through the roof, and we get a fight against him and Kammy Koopa. It all comes together. Bowser's been spending all of his time playing catch-up throughout the game, but he finally made it just in time for the end. Obviously though, he still has no idea what's going on. He'd only been looking for the crystal stars knowing that Mario wanted them. He didn't even know that Peach was around. Anyways, after defeating Bowser again in a much easier fight than the first game, Mario realizes that Grotus is gone and so is Peach. I guess it's time for the big final fight. Mario and his partners make their way down a bunch of stairs, but it seems like they're too late. Grotus and Peach are in front of a large coffin, and Grotus summons the demon. Black flames spark from the candles, and as the demon awakens, darkness covers the world. So yeah, this is kinda bad, but it does a really good job of raising the stakes. If you've read all the legends, this is probably not a big surprise, but most people probably wouldn't have sought them out, so going from an evil guy wanting power to an ancient demon threatening the entire world is a pretty big jump. The demon, known as the Shadow Queen, possesses Peach, which rattles the very earth. As the new Shadow Queen awakens, it seems like Grotus has won. But there is a twist. It seems like the Shadow Sirens were playing the long game and at the last minute have played the Uno reverse card. The Shadow Queen immediately turns on Grotus, destroying him. You see, Grotus was fed a bill of lies, being told that once summoned, the demon would obey the one who summoned it, and he was planning on this in his plot to take over the world. But the Shadow Queen takes orders from no one. Bedlam knew this and specifically guided Grotus in a way that forwarded her goal of releasing her queen, obviously while playing incompetent in order to keep a low profile. After growing a soul and refusing to cooperate with the Shadow Queen, the final battle begins. I love this fight because it's really well designed, has a lot of great moments, and is really challenging if you don't know what you're doing or haven't properly prepared. Seriously, the Shadow Queen can do upwards of 20 damage in a turn if she wants to. If you aren't prepared for that, you're gonna die really fast. But I do have one small gripe about the whole thing. Narratively, its structure is basically identical to Bowser's final fight in Paper Mario, minus the excellent section where Peach and Twink combat Kammy Koopa. The fight begins, and after a few turns, the Shadow Queen unleashes her full power, making her invincible. It seems like all hope is lost, but with the power of the crystal stars, everyone that Mario has inadvertently helped throughout his adventure sends words of encouragement, and with their power is able to break through the Shadow Queen's guard, letting the real final fight begin. This is one of the very few bits in the Thousand Year Door that doesn't exceed its predecessor. They kind of really nailed the climax in Paper Mario, so I guess they figured doing that again would basically be fine. And yeah, it is, but aside from the Shadow Queen herself, and the fact that Mario has to actually harm Peach in order to fight her, it kinda does feel like a bit of a retread. It doesn't even really have the tie-in to gameplay like Paper Mario did either. In that game, the Star Beam gets upgraded to the Peach Beam, which lets Mario break Bowser's barrier. There's no new gameplay here. Peach does give Mario some power, but it really doesn't amount to much. What would have been amazing is if the Crystal Stars absorbed all that energy from Mario's friends and allies, allowing him to have unlimited star power for the final phase of the fight, or have a guaranteed random star power each turn, something like that. obviously cranking up the Shadow Queen's health to still make it a challenging fight. Now, it sounds like I'm being negative here, but that really isn't my intention. This fight is incredible, and on a pure fun factor, easily outpaces Bowser. But on a narrative level, it's really only just as good, and for a game that is so constantly outdoing everything that came before, being only just as good kinda seems like a downgrade. But even then, it's really nice to see all of the people Mario has helped cheer him on, knowing that he's their only hope, and believe he'll be able to make things right again. When the fight is over, the Shadow Queen is destroyed, and with their queen gone, the Shadow Sirens retreat. And thankfully, despite being walloped upon, Peach is completely fine. And with that, the day is saved, and the threat to the world is gone forever. But despite what you may have expected, there's no big bombastic celebration or parade in Mario's honor. The world just kind of goes back to normal. Most people don't even know what happened or why the sky went dark and the crystal stars dispersed. I think that is for the best, honestly. Knowing how close the world was to total destruction is probably not a thought most people would want in their minds all the time. Life in Rogueport is hard enough as it is. And unfortunately for all of Mario's friends, he and Peach can't stay in Rogueport forever and have to leave. The final scene here is really bittersweet, and it works so well because of how understated the whole situation is. Mario games don't normally get these sort of conclusions, it's always all happy all the time, but here, Mario and his friends truly have to say goodbye. We know it's not goodbye forever, but that doesn't really make it any easier. These are people Mario's traveled with, grown to know and care about. In case of Delos Steers, he's literally known Mario his entire life. I know I joked about Mario being evil, but really, throughout their travels, Mario has helped each of his partners grow and become better versions of themselves. Koops has found his inner courage and strength, Flurry's got her inspiration and determined to get back into showbiz, and not to harp on this too much, but thanks to Mario's actions, Bobbery's got his entire life back. If not for Mario, he'd still be locked in his house, completely overcome by his grief and anger. But all good things do have to come to an end. So Mario and Peach get on the boat and sail back towards the Mushroom Kingdom. Thankfully, we do get a little more afterwards. Goombella sends Mario a letter explaining what everyone's been up to, which is really nice, just before Peach barges into his and Luigi's house with another treasure map to go hunting for. Oh dear. And believe it or not, there's actually a post-game here. Mario heads back to Rogueport and gets all of his partners back, and you can go exploring to find things you missed, clear out any of the old or new troubles in the Trouble Center, and push down through the Pit of 100 Trials if you haven't already. It's not a super fleshed out endgame, and I kinda wish you had to go and directly find all of your partners again, rather than all of them just showing up in your party, but it is nice. You can even head to Poshley Heights and talk to Lady Bo from the first game. I always look forward to the post-game, not really because there's a ton of stuff to do, but mainly because it just lets me be in this world more. Yes, for all intents and purposes, Rogueport itself is a pretty awful place, but even then, its citizens and all of the people and places that surround it are so vibrant and fun to be in. It's just so much more interesting than the Mushroom Kingdom, and don't get me wrong, I do love the Mushroom Kingdom, but when Mario games expand on this universe, it can result in worlds that are hard to match, and this is certainly one of them. And on top of that, filling this world with characters and stories that flesh it out, and the incredible mechanical backbone that supports the whole experience, easily cements this game as one of my favorite games not just on the GameCube, not just in the Mario series, but of all time. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door really is the perfect video game sequel. Everything it does, at worst, is just as good as its predecessor, and in an overwhelming number of areas is simply better. As a game, it's more fun to play, as a world, it's more expansive, unique, and interesting, and as a story, it's more ambitious, more emotional, and more engaging than the ones that came before. Unfortunately, the series would never see these heights again, but the end is not upon us quite yet. Before the fall, Paper Mario would give us one more game that had heights just as dizzying as the Thousand Year Door. It would be the most creative, most unique, most lore-heavy game in the series. And while its highs were very high, its lows were equally quite low. I'll see you all next time when I go into the Paper Mario franchise's black sheep, or Shiny Wooloo, Super Paper Mario. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all later.